Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. My name is Brandon Adams, and if you've joined us before, you know how all of this goes. Over the course of our time here, we'll hear from an entire collection of Dog Nation experts. I use that in air quotes. Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, myself, Connor Riley will all weigh in. We'll also hear from Dari Payro, our friend from our friends at R.S. Andrews. And Dari will decide if he wants to go with the flow. And obviously, this is a game we hope all of you play along with us, much the same way Dari decides if he likes our picks or not. You can decide if you like any of our picks here, and you can decide where to put your own money for your picks here this weekend. Now, we do a lot of shows around here, and one of the things I try to do is be really, really honest with my audience, whether it be Dog Nation Daily or any of the broadcasts that I'm a part of. We've never pretended like R.S. Andrews Go with the Flow airs live. It's the only show I believe that we do all week that does not air live. This show is never live when we do it. However, one thing is always going to be a little bit risky anytime that you do as much broadcast stuff as we do. And while we do almost all of our shows live, we have a little recorded bits in these shows from time to time, whether it be DN90 or an interview on Dog Nation Daily or something like that. You always run the risk of it not quite recording the way you want to. Well, today is one of those days for Go with the Flow presented by R.S. Andrews, because when you watch the show, one of the things you hear is Dari's joining us by phone. We got Jeff and Mike joining us by video. We have a lot of moving parts here on this show, and we did all of this here to get ready for Friday's release of the broadcast once again, but somehow gremlins get in the machine from time to time. We ended up recording the audio, not the video, so you won't hear us doing a lot of interaction back and forth with Dari today. He'll give us his picks the same way that Mike and Jeff do, but not a lot of interaction on that because that video, well, it's been lost to time. A great episode of the program we did a little early. We are now doing this again. Now, luckily, one of the things that is going to make the broadcast that you're watching now seem authentic, not like we've already done this one time before, is I can barely remember my own picks. I have no idea what anyone else has picked. I don't remember what Mike picked. I don't remember what Jeff picked. Dari's picks will be a surprise. Connor's picks will be a surprise. And when I act surprised, it's not because I'm acting. I literally just don't have any kind of memory of that. So we recorded this once already. Didn't quite go as planned, but we were at least able to salvage the audio, which means you'll hear Dari's picks and everybody else's picks all the way around. Now, before we get into these picks, let me give you an update on where things stand right now. A little bit of a shaky week for everybody, all things considered. Me, a little bit shakier than others. After 3 straight winning weeks, last week a little bit of what I'm going to call a pre-rally decline. 3-5-1. We all took the same push last week with Memphis favored by 6, winning by 6 in the Liberty Bowl against SMU. But Connor and Dari do split it 4-4-1. That also makes a pretty nice race for these two for the top of our tote board right now. Connor a couple of games out in front. Me well behind, but still time to catch up. I've always been a little bit of a closer when it comes to that kind of thing. I'm looking forward to closing in on these two guys before the year is done. Fun series of games for us to pick. A lot on LSU, Alabama a little bit later on. Let me start, though, with Missouri coming to Georgia, a game that, at least from a point spread standpoint, I think is just a little bit tricky. Dogs favored by 17 points. And before we hear from Mike Griffith on this, let me remind you that all of Go with the Flow is brought to you by our friends at R.S. Andrews. You know, we trusted R.S. Andrews for a long time here at Dog Nation for all of our air, heating, plumbing, electric needs. This time of year might be that time of year you're thinking more about the heat part of this, because a lot of you have kicked on that heat for the first time, especially on some of these cold nights. When it comes on, you have a couple things in mind. Is this heating system, is this furnace going to keep me warm all winter long? And is it going to be safe for me and my family for the cold weather season to come? Well, R.S. Andrews can give you the peace of mind you need for that. It's their $99 mega furnace safety check. They'll make sure your system is ready to make it through the winter. Factory fresh specs, that's what they'll get it back to. They're on time, well-trained, clean tech's going to show up at your house. They're going to take good care of you and really put a smile on your face, because story after story, R.S. Andrews has been delivering smiles for quite some time. So find them online at rsandrews.com. And with that said, speaking of smiles, hopefully our picks can deliver some for you here this week, including Georgia, 17-point favorite, hosting Missouri. Mike Griffith, you have the honors. You may start us off.
Start with Georgia. They're at home against Missouri, and Kirby Smart talked about what a tough matchup Missouri's always been in Missouri, not here in Athens. Take Georgia 31-10 over Missouri.
So Mike Griffith on the side of the Georgia Bulldogs, minus the 17 points. Our Dog Nation recruiting insider is Jeff Sintel. He'll weigh in next. Your thoughts, Jeff, on the game?
17-point favorite. I think it's going to be 34 degrees outside during the part of this game. Don't think there'll be any precipitation happening at that point. That's a big number. I think Georgia can get to a 20-point win, so I think Georgia will cover that 17-point spread.
Jeff Sentell giving a bit of a TED talk as he explains his pick of Georgia minus the 17 points there, but he's also on the side of the dogs. So the Riders go 2 for 2 in taking UGA. Dog Nation Daily, listeners and viewers, how are you feeling about this? Yeah, 81% taking UGA. Dog fans feeling pretty good. Coming off the cocktail party from a week ago, a little bit of a cocktail party high for sure there on that. So Connor Riley, we come to you. Clean sweep thus far, Georgia over Missouri. Number is at 17 points here. Is this an easy game for you to pick in your mind?
I think it kind of is, but maybe not for any real reason other than Missouri has just been awful on the road this year. They've lost 3 times as a favorite. They got just destroyed by Kentucky, and I get that the game was in the rain, but just they have not played well on the road. Kelly Bryant is hurt in this game. And this Georgia team is far and away the most talented team they've played to this point in the season. I think when you stir all of those 3 things together and add in the fact that this is a night game, the crowd is going to be there, ready to go, and I think that's going to help this team out. Whereas if it was a noon game, I would be a little bit more worried about this. But when you combine those 4 factors, I think Georgia can win this game by 17, 20, 21 points.
So I like Georgia here. I'm going to take a minus the 17 as well. I actually don't like them, though, as much as I thought that I probably would. Now, I don't think, anyway, Georgia's challenging this game, but in terms of covering easy, maybe not quite as easy as I initially thought. Georgia is 0-3 against the spread in 3 previous meetings against Missouri under Kirby Smart. Georgia also 4-4 against the spread this season overall. That's 3-3 versus Power 5 teams. Missouri, as Connor mentioned, been bad on the road, but also just kind of a weird season's worth of streaks for them. Lost the first game of the season to Wyoming. Then Missouri covered in 4 straight, scored a lot of points in doing so. Has now failed to cover the last 3, including back-to-back road losses at Vanderbilt and Kentucky, so not exactly big-time competition that Missouri has struggled against. When I first looked at this line, it just seemed way too low to me. And the thing I was kind of basing this off was, Georgia was about a 24.5-point favorite against Kentucky, rain game, but still won by 21 points. So came within relatively speaking of, kind of being involved with the Kentucky point spread. And then Kentucky actually handled Missouri pretty easily, won that game 29-7. So you ask the question of, well, how is Georgia only favored by 17 points here in this spot? But then you also remember the team that beat Georgia outright, South Carolina, went to Columbia, Missouri, and lost 34-14 to the Tigers a little earlier in the season. So kind of some conflicting data on this, all things being equal. I think Georgia feels pretty good about itself, though, coming off the win against Florida. That's enough for me to at least like the dogs here minus the 17. That's my pick, and that puts the flow in a clean sweep on the side of the Georgia Bulldogs here. So Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews, do you want to go with the flow?
I'm going with the flow.
Okay.
We'll make it a family pot. I'm jumping in. I think Georgia is going to build off the win against Florida. They're playing at home. It's a night game. They're going to be fired up. I think their defense is going to have a really good outing. This is Missouri's 3rd straight road game. I think they're kind of tired. They're worn out. They just lost 2 of those. So I think they're going to lose another one. I think they're going to cover the 17.
Can I brag on ourselves just for a second? If you didn't know, if I didn't tell you off the top of the program that we botched the first recording of this and had to re-record the whole thing again, and we're using Dari's audio from the first show, you'd never know. We just rattled through 2 pieces of video, Connor live in studio, me doing my thing. I toss it to Dari. Dari makes his pick. This could have totally passed as live. So y'all just better be thankful that I'm as honest as I am, because we could have totally passed this being live. Now, everybody on the side of Georgia, sometimes this year when we've all been on the same side, that hasn't quite worked out so well, but something tells me on Saturday I think you might be okay. By the way, if you're interested in betting this game yourself, you can find some 16s out there. So now, by the time you see this, that may have changed even a little bit more. But a lot of fluctuation with this. We have it at 17. You might be able to find it at 16. So pay really close attention to that. We'll do LSU going to Alabama here in just a moment on Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews. Before that, though, let's make a stop over in Gainesville, Florida. Sleepy noon start for a Florida team, having lost to Georgia last week. Is that a scary spot for the Gators? Goodness knows I hope so, but let's find out what the gambling public thinks about this. And let's start with Dog Nation's Mike Griffith. Florida, 26.5-point favorite against Vanderbilt in the Swamp. Mike, what do you think?
I'm saying take Vanderbilt in 26.5 points. My final score, Florida 27, Vanderbilt 13.
So Mike going on the side of Vanderbilt plus the big number here. Jeff Sintel, do you agree?
As badly as I want to think, I take those 26 points and roll with the Commodores and Derek Mason. And you got to think about Mullen pulling his team together after a tough loss where they rally around and let's stay alive in the SEC East race. I think Florida's going to cover that 26 points, so I'm going to lay that spread. I'm going to take the Gators in spite of that lofty point margin.
So Jeff Sintel on the side of Florida there. He explains that. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, my hope is they are not on the side of Florida. If not, what have we been doing the last few years? Touting ourselves as Gator haters. Yeah, 51% take Vanderbilt plus the points. I like to see that. So 2-1 margin favors the underdog here. Connor, what do you think about Vanderbilt in Florida?
Vanderbilt's probably the worst team in the SEC East. I don't want to shortchange Arkansas there.
Yes, say Arkansas would love to have a word with you if you're going to talk about worst team in the SEC.
But I think I like Vanderbilt here. 26.5 points is a lot of points. And the last two times Florida has played Georgia and lost under Kirby Smart, they've come out the next week and not just failed to cover, they've outright lost.
That's a big number.
And
good stat.
This is a noon kickoff. I think, Florida fans are not going to be in this. This Vanderbilt team stinks. It's Florida Vanderbilt. Who's really going to be up for that? I think this Florida team sort of treats that Georgia game like it's their Super Bowl, and they'll lose that again. I think they're going to come out flat. I think Florida's going to win. I think Florida's going to win by multiple touchdowns, but I don't think they're going to win by 4 touchdowns. Give me Vanderbilt here.
Yeah, I'm going to take Vanderbilt here as well, and obviously there may be a degree of wishful thinking involved with all of this, but it's worth pointing out that in Dan Mullen's first meeting as Florida coach with Vanderbilt a year ago, Gators did cover, but just barely. They won by 10 while being favored by 9.5. Of course, a lot of us have memories years ago of Florida teams that won the SEC East in 2015, 2016. Those teams struggled with Vanderbilt mightily. Just a 9-7 win for the Gators back in 2015. A 13-6 win for the Gators in 2016. Those two numbers don't really factor into this game, but is at least a curiosity to kind of add to the fact that over the course of the last half decade or so, Florida has not always played well against Vanderbilt. Here's what matters to me a little bit more, though. This is a spot that Florida hasn't been in yet under Dan Mullen. Believe it or not, this is the first time that Florida is favored by 20 or more points against an FBS foe dating back to Mullen's beginning of his Florida career at the beginning of the 2018 season. Florida has been in 5 other instances a 20-plus point favorite, but all of those under Dan Mullen have been non-FBS foes. They are 4-0-1 against the spread there in those games, but those are easy non-conference games. This is an FBS foe for the first time as that 20-plus point favorite. That makes me skeptical of Florida here. Vanderbilt, as you might imagine, been a 20-plus point road underdog plenty. They've actually covered in that spot 3 of the last 4. So I think that Florida is dealing with an issue when it comes to motivation. After having lost to Georgia, I think the fans are not into this game. Plus, I just think Florida's only kind of, an above-average team. This is not a great team. This, may not even be a good team. If you're going to let me take the underdog and give me 26.5 points, I'm going to do that. And so I like Vanderbilt plus the 26.5 for all the reasons that I just mentioned. Dari Payro, that puts the flow on the side of Vanderbilt. Do you want to go with the flow?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the flow.
Nice.
So no losses here either. I think I'm going to take the Commodores to cover the 26.5 points, the big number. It's got to be hard for Florida to actually get up for this game after losing to Georgia. I'm not too confident in this pick like everyone else, but I'm going to take the point.
All right, so Dari does take Vanderbilt plus the points. This is going to actually be a pretty fun game to watch just to see how much better Florida plays. I mean, remember, we say motivation's an issue. They can still win the SEC East, but they needed some help from Georgia to do that. Obviously, Georgia's going to try to keep that from happening. So Gators have something to play for, but maybe not quite so motivated to go out there and just really flex against Vanderbilt on Saturday. And, of course, if you're just joining us, you hear Dari. We recorded his audio earlier, had a little bit of a technical issue, so the interactions that you're used to getting with us and him, you may not get quite as much of that here today. But you can get a great face-to-face interaction, a terrific telephone interaction with Dari and the whole team over at RS Andrews when you reach out to them online at rsandrews.com. And if you've got an air, a heating, a plumbing, or an electric need, that's exactly what you should do. Story after story, RS Andrews have been delivering smiles, and they're the only one that Dog Nation would trust because of this simple thing. They just keep their promises. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. A lot of these fly-by-night companies, you can't get that level of trustworthy, dependable service. Well, R.S. Andrews made that the hallmark of their industry, their business, for a long time. That's what they're known for within their industry. So check them out online at rsandrews.com, and they will take good care of you. All right, it is LSU and Alabama. This has been a hot topic here on Dog Nation Daily dating back to the summer, and I'm sure the debate will be intense here as the game gets ready to take place on Saturday. But before I weigh in, before Jeff and Dari and Connor weigh in, let's give Mike Griffith a chance to start us off. Underdog catching 6 of the AP number 1 team in the country, though. What does that mean for LSU? Mike Griffith, what do you think?
I say take Alabama and give 6 points. I've got it Alabama 31, LSU 13.
So a strong pick of Alabama by an easy margin. That's what Mike Griffith has to say there. Jeff Sintel, how about you? Which side are you on?
Alabama's a 6-point favorite. For a fellow like me that thinks LSU can win this game straight up and will win that game straight up, I'm going to take those 6 points. Bama doesn't have a good history with that number, and I'm sure a lot of those sports wagerers will know all about that.
So a little bit of a Riverside from Jeff Sintel. He does take LSU. So split decision among the writers. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, game of the day around college football. Where do they come down on this? A little bit heavier than I would have thought. 69% do take LSU. So they're expecting a nice performance from the Tigers there. Probably a little bit more than I would have thought of on the side of the underdog. Connor, you've been pretty outspoken about this game. I've been pretty outspoken about this game, and guess here we are a couple, final hours before the game kicks off. I'm not guessing you're going to change your mind.
Yeah, we've been pretty steadfast on this, all throughout the offseason, and we've talked this up a lot. This is a very good LSU team. It's the best team they've had, I think, since that 2011 team that was actually able to go in and beat Alabama that day. And Joe Burrow has been great. I understand that. One, an actual football point in this. Michael Divinity, LSU's best pass rusher in terms of sacks, dismissed from the team this week. He will not be playing. I do think that is a significant loss for an LSU defense that has not been great and does not have great depth, especially in the back end there. But from a non-football standpoint, Alabama has just owned LSU. Do you know that the last time LSU beat Alabama at all, and granted it was in Tuscaloosa, I took the SAT that day.
Yeah.
That was over 8 years ago.
Long time, no doubt.
A long time. And at the end of the day, the thing I keep coming back to, I can't talk myself into figuring out how an Ed Orgeron-led team, Ed Orgeron scheming things up, and I know he relies a lot on Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator, their passing game coordinator, and Dave Aranda, their defensive coordinator, but I just can't see him being the guy that beats Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa, in Bryant-Denny Stadium. I don't love this line at 6. I was hoping he'd get bet down more to 3.5, 3, but give me Alabama here.
So a couple thoughts from me on this. First of all, if you're a longtime listener or viewer to Dog Nation Daily, you know we called the resurgence of the LSU offense during the offseason. It was our reason for taking them to win the SEC West. So we're not surprised to see LSU playing well offensively right now. Good quarterback, good wide receivers. Obviously, a big-time coaching hire with Joe Brady running the passing game there. I'd also say that Ed Orgeron may have been better as a game coach against the spread than you might think. But overall, here's what really matters to me in the game. Because LSU is a better offense, better than they have been being, that's obviously the way in which I think they have to win this game on Saturday. I know some people will say maybe they like it a lower scoring game because of the high-profile nature of the game. I think that's bad for LSU. I think they need to do what they have been doing, which is score a bunch of points. The reason I feel that way is, listen to these numbers. These are the last 5 losses that Alabama has sustained. About 44-16 to Clemson a year ago, 26-14 to Auburn in 2017, 35-31 to Clemson back in the 2016 National Championship, 43-37 regular season loss to Ole Miss in 2015, and then the playoff loss to Ohio State in 2014, 42-35. With the exception of the one Auburn game in 2017 where the winning team only scored 26, beating Alabama other than that over the last half-decade has meant scoring points, 44, 35, 43, 42. You've got to score points to beat Alabama. High-scoring games have mostly been when Alabama has lost and the rare instances when they have lost. That's what obviously LSU is capable of doing. One of the reasons why I like them on Saturday. Now, I'm going to cite some numbers here. I'm going to give credit to the Bear, Chris Felica from ESPN. This is not my research. This is his, but it bolsters the point I want to make. Over the last 40 years, the AP number 1 has been an underdog 5 times. And in all 5 of those instances, the number 1 team has won outright as an underdog. So in this particular case, the polls have been right. The Vegas folks have been wrong. maybe that's a harbinger of good things to come for LSU here. And then if you want to go back and look at Nick Saban as a favorite, but a favorite of less than 7 points, in the 4 instances where Saban's found himself in that scenario as an Alabama coach, just 0-3-1 against the spread. So narrow favorite, not always a great situation for Nick Saban. Typically hasn't been a good situation. Underdog as a number 1 AP poll team. That's typically worked out well for teams. That's where LSU finds itself on Saturday. But more importantly, they can do what has been needed to be done to beat Alabama. That's score a lot of points. I think this will be a typical LSU game on Saturday, and I just think that Alabama is going to have a hard time matching the firepower. I like LSU to win the game outright on the road, but as a way of playing it safe, I'll just take the 6 points here for now, and that puts the flow on this game on the side of LSU. Dari, I pretty much already know what you're going to do because I know how you've treated the Crimson Tide already this season, but I guess the rules require me asking you, do you want to go with the flow?
I'm going with Bama, like always. LSU, there's some interesting stats that you have there, too, that support that LSU pick. But LSU's secondary, even though they have a couple NFL studs, the rest of the secondary and the depth just isn't there. And they've been extremely poor at tackling. Alabama's secondary is way better in quality and in depth. Burroughs has been good against great defenses this year, but I think that's going to be the difference in the game, and Alabama's going to be able to exploit the weak tackling in LSU's secondary. They're also going to control the clock in this game, and playing at home matters big in this matchup this year.
So really good. I mean, listen, I don't agree with Dari's pick, but his explanation for why he takes Alabama, one of the reasons why I love doing the show, he obviously puts a lot of research into his picks, which is always kind of a fun thing to hear. So that's the big game of the day. A little bit of a split decision amongst our crew about how it goes down between LSU and Alabama. I'm sure you have your own opinions on that. By the way, it's Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Sanders. We'll get back to Georgia and Missouri before we're done here, but let's stay on the SEC just for a moment before we get there. Tennessee goes to Lexington. Tennessee at one point in time was an underdog in this spot, but the line is kind of flipped. Vol's now a -1 next to the name as they play in Kroger Field Commonwealth Stadium on Saturday. They are the 1-point favorite, a little bit of a reversal from where this thing opened when the Wildcats initially were the favorite. So kind of a wild ride here between these two teams. Mike Griffith, go ahead and tell us what you think.
It started with Kentucky as the favorite. Now Tennessee, a 1-point favorite. I say take the Wildcats in the point. Kentucky 24, Tennessee 21.
So Mike on the side of Kentucky here as the home team. Jeff Sintel, what do you think?
That is at Kentucky, correct?
Yes, it is.
I like Tennessee. I like the way they're kind of covering up things and feeding those two big hoss receivers. I think Tennessee will win that game, and that point matters little, but I think Tennessee will probably win by this game by about 7 points.
Jeff going to let it ride with Jeremy Pruitt and Tennessee. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, curious to see what the split is on this. 59% do take Tennessee. Vols have been hot as of late. So by a 2-1 margin, Tennessee owns the flow for the moment. Connor Riley, where do you come down on this one?
Tennessee's turned things around. They've won, I believe, 3 straight games. They're sort of figuring things out. It's a matchup of 2 former Florida State defensive coordinators in Pruitt and Mark Stoops. It could also be a meeting between a former Florida State defensive coordinator and Florida State's next head coach, Mark Stoops.
You're right about that.
I know Tennessee's the better team. I don't say I know. I think they're the more talented team here. But I think Kentucky's the more they're the more well-coached team here. I think they're still going to remember last year's loss down there in Knoxville. I think that's going to motivate them a little bit to be up for this game. I really like Lynn Bowden and what he's been able to do against teams not named Georgia. And I just think Kentucky's going to find a way to win this game. This would be huge for them and huge for Stoops in terms of getting to a bowl for both teams. And I think Stoops, having navigated these waters before, knows how to do that a little bit better than Jeremy Pruitt in Tennessee. So give me the Wildcats here.
So in our lost recording of this conversation from a little bit earlier, I said that I think the data in this game screams one side, but I'm actually going to go against the data. I'm going to go against the numbers on this, which is my prerogative as a human being to trust my own eyes and brain more so than the numbers themselves. The numbers scream for Tennessee. This matters to me. Last year, as just a 5-point underdog, or as a 5-point underdog against Kentucky right now is a top 15 team. They'd, of course, lost to Georgia, but had had really beaten a lot of teams and really went on to play pretty well in the bowl game. So Kentucky was a good team a year ago, but in Knoxville lost this game to Tennessee 24-7. That's one of Jeremy Pruitt's better wins as Tennessee coach thus far. That big number right there kind of speaks to the fact that Tennessee's played well in the spot. Also, long-term history, and it hasn't been the world's greatest decade for Tennessee all the way around. But they're 8-2 straight up in their last 10 versus Kentucky, and also 8-2 against the spread over the course of the last 10 meetings there as well. So this is a series, even though Tennessee's not really been in the prime of its program, has kind of still dominated Kentucky. However, the reason why I can't trust them right now is simply this. We're talking about the first time in 3 years that Tennessee's been a road favorite. This is just too much for a team that back earlier in the year we had a lot of questions about. They've been hot as of late. Connor mentioned a 3-game streak on the field, but also a 4-game streak against the spread, against the number. Tennessee's been playing much better. This is one of those scenarios, though, where I'd rather, and I've taken them a lot this year, and I've been right when I've taken Tennessee, but this is one of those situations where I'd rather stop taking them a week too soon as opposed to keep taking them a week too late. This feels like an expiration date for me. The hot run that Tennessee's been on as of late, I just don't trust them here in this spot. I don't think that Kentucky's necessarily a great team, but I do think the Wildcats got a little bit to play for. Given the fact that the SEC Bowl situation is so top-heavy, multiple playoff teams potentially, obviously New Year's 6 participants, this is a chance for that pecking order to keep climbing up. If Kentucky wins, they could be in an okay spot for a bowl here. They got a lot to play for, in other words, there in Commonwealth Stadium and Kroger Field on Saturday night. So I initially thought I was on the way to taking Kentucky. The numbers almost make me take Tennessee, but I'm going to stick with my initial gut on this. I'm going to take Kentucky as a 1-point road underdog, and obviously we'll say money line on that just to keep from pushing with the 1, and we'll make that the pick, and that means the flow is going to be on the side of Kentucky, correct? So Dari Payro, R.S. Andrews, do you want to go with the flow and take Kentucky?
I am not going with the flow.
Okay.
I'm going with the Vols. Hey, Kentucky, guess what? Tennessee can stop the run. That's the only thing Kentucky's been doing well this year. They're struggling passing, and Tennessee's a team that can stop that run. Tennessee's won 3 of their last 4. Explosive offenses have been the type of team that have given Tennessee problems, and that's not Kentucky. I really love this game. I think Tennessee's going to win this by double digits, and this win is going to propel Tennessee to get 6 on the year and make a bowl.
So good pick. Good pick there from Dari Payro coming in to take the Kentucky side of that one. Very, very interesting pick here. What I think is going to be a really pretty fun game around the SEC, all things considered, between Kentucky and Tennessee. It's Go With the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. We'll have more on Georgia, Missouri coming up. We'll talk about the total number of points expected there in that one. Let's take a trip out to the Big Ten here for a moment before we get there. And as we do, I'll also remind you that all this is brought to you by our friends at R.S. Andrews. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. We trust R.S. Andrews with all of that here for us. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles. They just have made it their life's work to be experts at all those systems, those things behind the wall in your house that you can't see, but you hope work the way they're supposed to. Truth is, when it comes to me, I don't know a lot about that kind of stuff, but I know the folks at R.S. Andrews know plenty about it. They've made sure they are the experts in that field. So when you have a water heater issue or electrical issue, or maybe prominently this time of year, kind of a heating issue, your furnace not quite working correctly, or you're not sure it's going to keep working throughout the summer, or you're maybe not even sure if it's safe enough, R.S. Andrews can give you peace of mind on that and get all those systems back to factory fresh specs. But you've got to reach out to them online at rsandrews.com. All right, let's go to the Big Ten here for a moment. And, I've been pretty good with my SEC picks, all things considered. It's when I get outside the league, it's where I've had some trouble. So I'm going to try to keep it pretty safe and pretty simple, not overthink it too much when it comes to these non-SEC games for this week. But Mike Griffith, you know the Big Ten well. Penn State going to Minneapolis to take on the Golden Gophers, and P.J. Fleck looking to row the boat in a big national television showcase on Saturday. What do you think about Minnesota, Penn State?
The game is in Minnesota. Penn State a 6.5-point favorite. I say take PJ Fleck and the Gophers, and at 6.5 points, I got Minnesota winning this game outright, 27-24.
On the side of the Golden Gophers is Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, Dog Nation's recruiting insider. What do you think?
Wow, this is not enough points for this one. I like Penn State. I like Penn State in a big way by this game, definitely by more than 6.5 points.
Jeff's going to go Nittany Lions, so split decision among the scribes there. Dog Nation Daily, listeners and viewers, how about your thoughts on this? 66% on Penn State as about a touchdown favorite here against the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Connor Riley, you've been good when it comes to the non-SEC games. Do you feel strongly about this one?
I do. So, you mentioned earlier PJ Fleck's catchphrase, Minnesota. They like to row the boat there. I think we're going to see, a boating disaster this weekend. I think, Fleck's going to row that boat right into an iceberg. He's going to, row the Lusitania right into some German waters and some German U-boats there. Penn State's defense is very, very good, very athletic, very talented, especially along the front there. This is by far the best team Minnesota has played to this point in the year, and I do think they're going to get exposed a little bit. Get this game at 6.5 if you can, because I do think it's going to be very low scoring, but offensively for Penn State, KJ Hamler was one of the most explosive, if not the most explosive playmakers in all of college football. I think he can bust one or two on this Minnesota team. Give me the Nittany Lions here. Yeah,
I told you I was going to try to keep my picks on this simple. I did notice what I thought was pretty interesting with the ESPN FPI data. Penn State is 5th according to ESPN FPI, Minnesota just 20th. So the data folks here, at least when it comes to ESPN, sees a pretty big gap between Penn State and Minnesota, all things being equal. You want to check to see how's Penn State doing on the road. They've been fine. 3 straight they've covered this season as a road favorite. All things being equal, 6.5 doesn't sound like too much for me. At the risk of oversimplifying this, I like Penn State. I said I wasn't going to complicate it with my non-SEC picks, and this is an example of that. Maybe a square to be on the favorite here, especially on the road, but you know what? It's the best I got for you right now, so I'd take Penn State. That puts the flow on the side of the Nittany Lions, too. Dari Payro, R.S. Andrews. Do you want to go with the flow?
Yes, I'm going to the flow. I'm paying Penn State. I like it to be a very low-scoring game. It's going to be very slow, boring game to watch. Minnesota is going to control the clock. They do have some bulletin board material, PJ Fleck for his team. They were ranked 13th in the AP poll last week, and the college football playoff poll came out and dropped them to 17th.
Yeah.
So I think they'll have a little motivation with that. However, they have number 4, Penn State, coming into their stadium. Both teams 8-0, and they are having trouble selling out the game. That seats 51,000 people. Come on, man. If your fans can't even get fired up, the team isn't going to be able to be fired up. Penn State's going to win this.
I think it's a great note from Dari. And for those of you that are just joining us, we had a little bit of a technical issue, so we recorded our audio earlier. We're kind of re-recording the video here, so all of our interactions don't exactly, get captured on video here today. We had a long conversation about this a little bit early, but that's a pretty good note, and kind of I'll let you join me on this. Dari bringing up the idea that it may not quite be a full stadium, and maybe Golden Gophers fans not excited enough to sell it out when I can't remember the last time that I thought Minnesota had as big a home game as this. I think Dari brings up a pretty good point. That's a potential factor in this game, that the Gophers fans not getting behind their football team. Now, this was, the old Clem Haskins basketball team days, Sam Jacobson and some of those guys that had some great success for the old basketball Minnesota team. You feel like they'd be making some noise. A little surprising here, right?
No, I'm going to be fair to the people of Minnesota here. Have you ever wanted to be outside in November in Minnesota?
But I thought they liked that kind of thing.
I don't think anyone likes being out there in that kind of temperature at that cold.
Listen, so I think it's a pretty good note from Dari Payro. Everybody on the side of Penn State, at least with the exception of Mike Griffith. So we'll see how that plays out coming up on Saturday. Another Big Ten game to give you here for a moment. Iowa goes to Camp Randall Stadium to take on Wisconsin. Whiskey, a 9.5-point favorite here. Mike Griffith, once again, the floor is yours to start us off.
Wisconsin is a 9.5-point favorite. I say take the Hawkeyes in the points. Wisconsin 31, Iowa 24.
So dog again for Mike Griffith going Hawkeyes there in Camp Randall. Jeff Sintel, what do you think?
Favorites. Badgers 9.5. I like that number. I think Wisconsin covers that spread. Give me Badgers with the points.
Jeff going Badgers with his pick. How about Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, one way or another? I'm sure they don't quite have the most confident opinion on this game one way or another, and I'm sure they had to be told the game was even being played. But nonetheless, all things being equal, they'll just take the favorite. 71% take Wisconsin here in this spot. Connor, do you have a more self-assured pick?
I do. I feel pretty good about this. I've been pretty good on both these teams, knowing when to pick them and when to pick against them. I like Iowa here.
Okay.
10 points, that's a lot for Wisconsin. I don't even know if Wisconsin is capable of scoring 10 points in this game. I think it's going to be a defensive, back and forth kind of game. I think Iowa, from an NFL perspective, might have a little bit more talent there. And at the end of the day, this Wisconsin team over the past month has just really struggled. They lost to Illinois. They got the doors blown off of them by Ohio State. This team is reeling. I know they had a bye week to sort of figure things out potentially, but I think this is a good Iowa team that's going to physical this game up. I think there's a good chance that Iowa might win this outright.
Wow.
But give me the Hawkeyes here to at least cover.
That's a strong pick. Not only have I not been good with non-SEC games, I've been terrible when it comes to Iowa. I've been wrong on them on both sides thus far this season. So I'm just going to try to keep this one simple too. I am going to take Wisconsin as the favorite here. These two teams have split their last 10 against the spread, but the last two, Wisconsin's actually won fairly comfortably by 13 points on average the last 2 years. Wisconsin's also been pretty good at home thus far this year. They're 4-1 against the spread as a home team. I believe the one outlier is that kind of ugly game they played against Northwestern a couple of weeks ago. Iowa, I mentioned before I was wrong when they went to Michigan earlier this year. They failed to cover that spot when I was on them there. So maybe a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth for the Hawkeyes, but maybe more interesting than that. And ultimately, this kind of stretches back a number of years, so it's not necessarily all that indicative of what happens on Saturday, but it's at least worth mentioning. 0-7 in their last 7 as a road underdog. So they have not done well away from Kinnick Stadium as an underdog. Haven't been much of a live dog there in that spot. So that's enough for me to like Wisconsin. I think that Wisconsin better probably than the team that looked bad at Ohio State in kind of a weird rain weather type game. I think Wisconsin's still probably a little bit better than they looked there in that spot. So I'll take them minus the 9.5, and that puts the flow on the side of Wisconsin, I believe. Flow on the side of the Badgers. Dari, do you want to go with the flow?
I do not. I'm going to take Iowa. Wisconsin's going to win this game. They play well at home. But I just don't think there's going to be a lot of points scored. Defensive, low-scoring game. I think it's going to be tight. I'll take the 9.5.
All right, so Dari Payro in on that one. He takes the underdog plus the 9.5 points. That's actually I'm interested, given the fact that we kind of have a split decision on that, makes me a little bit more interested in watching the game. Let me turn our attention back, though, to Georgia, Missouri here. The total number of points, the expectation there is 47. Georgia been a little bit of an under team as of late, it would seem. Any chance of going over on Saturday? Let's first start with Dog Nation's Mike Griffith. Your thoughts on the total points for Saturday between the Dogs and the Tigers?
On that Georgia game, it's 41 points. I say take the under. What do I got? 31-10? I got to push. I got to push the game. That's what I got.
So Mike Griffith going under there with his pick in Georgia, Missouri. Jeff Sintel, what do you think?
Don't see 47 points there, sports fans. I see something like a 31-10 type game. Don't see this number getting up to 47, especially with some wintry temperatures down there in Athens, Georgia.
So under for Jeff Sintel there as well. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers. Watch some Georgia games be a little low scoring as of late. How they feeling about Georgia, Kentucky on Saturday? 90% take the over. A little bit of a cocktail party high for sure for Dog fans there in that spot. Expecting a lot of points apparently under the lights in Sanford Stadium on Saturday. Connor, surprised by the audience taking the over here. Can you make a case of the over in this spot?
Missouri's just that awful on the road.
Okay.
They gave up 37 to Wyoming. At Wyoming, there is a case for that. They gave up 29 to a Kentucky team in a rainstorm just a week after Kentucky scored 0 in a rainstorm in Georgia. I could make cases all day long. I'm a professional.
Sure, of course.
However, I have to instruct people to take the under at 47 here, not at 41 like Mr. Griffith suggested.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Mike Griffith was calling up for a push on 41.
Which, suggesting a push is a coward's move anyway, but then to suggest a push at the wrong number is just even worse.
Yeah.
I like 41 here. Two very good defenses statistically anyway. Georgia number 1 in total defense, Missouri number 2. but I don't see Georgia scoring enough points offensively. I think they need to get in the 35-40 sort of range. I think they can get, maybe 34. They're going to kick field goals in the red zone, and that's going to make it hard to hit the over. Give me the under here.
Yeah, so we've said before about Mike Griffith. We don't like it when he calls for pushes. We think that's just being a little too precise, a little too cute. And if you're going to call for a push, make sure you use the correct number. Mike called for a bad number of 41. The number is 47. That's also floating around a little bit on this too, but it's not 41, nor will it be. But when you look at the overall situation for Georgia, you're left to wonder how in the world it gets to 47. Now, I agree with Connor. Missouri's not a great team right now, but here are the point totals for Georgia against FBS foes this season. Teamed up with Vanderbilt to score 36. The total for Notre Dame was 40. Georgia-Tennessee total of 57. That's the one outlier. South Carolina, 37 total points scored. Against Kentucky, only 21 points scored, all those on the Georgia side. Last week against Florida, a total of 41 was reached, which was well below that number there as well. On average against FBS foes, Georgia's averaging fewer than 39 points. Or I should say the total is averaging fewer than 39 total points thus far this season. Given that, it almost makes you wonder how in the world they get to 47. That may be an overly simplistic view of looking at this, but I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games against FBS foes this late in the season, that's not the smallest sample size in the world. Georgia's just not getting to 47 total points in its games very much. So because of that, I'll take the under. Normally this season when I've taken Georgia minus the points, I've typically gone over because Georgia's typically a pretty big favorite. In this particular case, though, I'm comfortable taking Georgia minus the 17 and under the 47 because of how stingy the Georgia defense has been. Dari, am I being too simplistic when I say that? Do you want to go with the flow and join us on the under here?
If it hits 41, he should be on the first flight to Vegas and let it ride.
That's true. Now that will be a pretty good point. We'll have to keep that in mind when this final score does indeed come in.
I'm going to go with the flow, and I'm going to take the under for all the same reasons. Two good defenses, and Georgia, his offense just hasn't been explosive as it has in the past, several years. I do know the past 3 meetings between Missouri and Georgia, they have all hit the over. And in the last 2 games, Georgia by itself has put up a total of 96 points. But this is a different Georgia offensive team, so I think the under is safe.
So under there on that, we'll watch and see how that plays out on Saturday. And I'm going to give ourselves a little bit of a hand again for a little technical difficulty that caused us to have to re-record this show. Other than the one time when I didn't hit my cue coming off Dari's pick, other than that, we've just been really hopping and moving along. And, of course, we'll have Dari back on the phone with us again next week. Dari actually had a little bit of a medical procedure this week, so to even be making his picks this week, to be back with us just goes to show you how determined and dedicated he is to making sure that he brings the best gambling information to all of you. So we appreciate Dari Payro for that. And by the way, the same level of dedication and determination the folks at R.S. Andrews show all the time to show up at your house on time, do great work for you. All those issues you may be facing with your air conditioning unit or your heating unit, your plumbing, your electric, if your water heater goes out, for instance, R.S. Andrews can take good care of you. It's rsandrews.com to find out more about that. rsandrews.com for more on that. Also, if you hear us using the point spread data throughout the show here, don't forget one of the best places you can find out about all your point spread stuff, the place where we get our numbers from our friends at MyBookie. Now, the cool thing is if you listen to me make my picks, you say, well, I can do better than that. You may even think you can do better than Connor or Dari or Jeff, Mike, anybody else. Well, if that be the case, put your money where your mouth is and become a winner. Go to our friends at MyBookie. And when you do, you can actually be a winner before your first bet's even placed. Our friends at MyBookie will give you a big first deposit bonus. They can double your first deposit. You can get up to $1,000. And so before you even make your bet, you've already got more money in your account than you started with. Then after that, you just make your picks. You play, you win, you get paid. MyBookie is known for the best player perks in the industry. The fast, no-hassle payout when you win. But in order to get that big first deposit bonus, you've got to use the promo code DOGNATION. All one word, spelled the way it's supposed to be, DAWG. Use the promo code DOGNATION, find MyBookie online, and then you'll be on your way after that. We've got to be on our way for now. Thanks so much for being with us as a part of Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Hope you'll have a great weekend of watching the games. Look forward to seeing you back here again next week at the same time, and best of luck to you with your own picks.